Now, it sounds as you explain it kind of obvious. This is the sort of thing that should have been around for years and years. But as far as I'm aware, you're doing something fairly unique here.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was a couple of companies doing it one way or another, or the agency model and BPOs, right, where suddenly you hire a lot of people in the Philippines and they put them under the entity. That always kind of was there. I think there's been a couple shifts in how the world of work thinks, that really triggered the need for a solution. Like, one of the things we're really, really good at, and one of the things we're changing is the employee experience, right? The idea that you can start working with someone, give them an employment contract, get them ready in like a couple of clicks and a couple of buttons, and really, really give them a great experience is completely new. While a lot of, even in the Valley, right? When I used to talk to investors and I used to tell them, I have a teammate in Ukraine, he's like one of the best engineers in the world. And he costs half of what you're paying, or one third of what you're paying in San Francisco, right? Which is, by the way, one of the bigger drivers also of Deel. The fact that generally in those clusters like San Francisco and New York, salaries have gone so high that it's really, really hard to compete on the job market, right, and on the marketplace. But most of those most of those investors, those people used to refer to my teammates as like my offshore team, right, or my outsourced team, and that always kind of bothered me, right? Like, it's not because they're not in San Francisco that they're just not my teammate and they're not part of my team. And that has completely changed, right? With the pandemic, with people relocating, with the way the world has like fought through the idea that it's not because you're not in my office that you're not my direct teammate. That has completely changed the perception and the perspective of everyone on that. And that has really triggered for really something that's new, which is, how do we give our international team an amazing experience that's as quality as what we give our local team? And that is really something that I'd say we've changed in the market.
How did you, come up with the idea? So obviously, most people know the story for Uber, and they're in this. Actually, from your neck of the woods, for your background, they're in this coffee shop after a conference in Paris, and it's raining, and they can't get a taxi, and obviously the rest is history. How did you guys come up with the idea for Deel?
Yeah, I think it was a little less sexy than an Uber. Let's say it's not we woke up one day and we say we want to build Deel. I think it was the accumulation of a lot of personal experiences. So I'm originally from France. I lived and grew up in Paris, but then I moved to the UK, to Israel, to the US, to like lots of different countries, and I went to an international school. I've been one of the one of the people that lived through, hey, my friend is one of the most amazing engineer, but he's back in Albania and he's earning $1,000 a month, while my friend from MIT is in San Francisco and job hopping from Twitter to Google to Facebook, taking a 20% increase every year, right? Every 6 months. And for me, it was crazy. It's like the amounts of money that are being spent on talent in geos versus others didn't make any sense, right? And luckily for me, my co-founder, so she's originally Chinese. We met at MIT at school together as well, and she kind of had a similar experience when she went back to China to build her first business. And for us, it was always very obvious. And then if you add to that the fact that when I started my first company, so I had a couple of ventures before Deel, and some of them went well, some of them went pretty bad. But the common ground was that all of them were bootstrapped, right? And I never fundraised money. And when I went back at the time was to Israel, the salaries of engineers is just so expensive, right? I just couldn't afford to work with anyone or to hire anyone at the time. So I directly was drawn into hiring in the Ukraine or in India to have talent I could afford and start working with them. And I remember like giving them those like contracts that I knew were bad, off the shelf template, didn't work for Ukraine. I remember looking at, and I hope you never have to go through that, but the terrible banking UI in of that Israeli little bank that like I had to press buttons. I didn't know where was the money when it was arriving. There's so many things that were showing me like, you're not giving a good experience to your team, you're not making this compliant. And it's not again, the conclusion of all of this was for me, hey, you've seen talent, that talent is everywhere. You see how bad the experience is and how unwell the processes are done to make this type of hires. Let's kind of fix that. So I didn't wake up in Paris one day and say, let's do it. I saw it throughout the few years of my life as an entrepreneur.
So then you've had the idea, you've experienced it. How long did you allow it to fester and bug you before you sort of made a decision that you really wanted to tackle this and start to work with your co-founder and attempt to develop what is now Deel?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really good at, and so you're asking me, how do you build a fast-growing and high-growth business? That ties back into that, is we're very decisive. So Shroi and I are sometimes not in the best way, but we make decisions really fast and we follow through with them and execute as much as we can. So we saw that as an opportunity in, I don't know, maybe November 2018. We're like, there's something there. We should dive into it deeper. January 2019, we were in San Francisco as part of an accelerator program called Y Combinator, starting to build it, right? So usually my way of thinking about entrepreneurship is, I don't remember who exactly, but someone gave me that advice a couple years ago. When you build products and startups, you just throw a lot of things on the wall and eventually you see what sticks. So I'm very much into that mindset. I threw a lot of balls on the wall and eventually one of them stuck, and that was Deel. So we just literally started coding the night we had the idea and then started building.
Did you start building immediately in November, or really was it just putting your ideas together and doing research and then putting applications into Y Combinator to try to be accepted?
We started building. My Y Combinator, regardless, I think one of the things I've learned, so one of the first companies I built, I built a product for about 1.5 years, 2 years. That's actually one of the longest products I've ever worked on. And I kind of lied to myself into thinking like there is something, like keep building, keep trying, etc. You'll get to that like product eventually will work. And what I realized is that now you want to see if something works, just like get on with it, try to build it, and don't wait for things to happen, right? Like put it in front of people, see what their reaction is, how should you improve it, how should you change it, and just be really fast on your feet. Because if you think about how we started with Deel versus where it is today, right? From a process, from a compliance standpoint, from all the things that we do, there's a huge gap, right? And even there's a gap in how I was thinking about the product and how I saw it evolving, right? So I usually say just build and do things in parallel, right? Apply to YC in parallel. Actually, if you have traction, right? If some people care about your product, you're much more likely to eventually receive funding or get into a program like Y Combinator, right? So waiting for those things is definitely not the right thing to do.